Interest Alliances. We are one of Cisco's distribution partners across Africa, so we work right from the Limpopo to the Mediterranean, basically, and into the Middle East and Near East as well. So without further ado, your main host for this morning is CWG, who I'm sure you're all well aware of. Need no further introduction, but the man who looks like a deer in the headlights over there, Peter, is just going to give you a couple of words about the company in this morning, and then he will introduce our main speaker for this morning, Mr. Sam KEIRU, who is the security specialist from Cisco, who will go through some more on that. So please, enjoy yourselves.
Today's event is about security of Cisco. I'm sure you're all aware of the current security threats happening. I'll just invite Sam to come and give us a highlight and summary of what he's going to talk about.
My name is Sam KEIRU. I work with Cisco Systems as the security account manager for everywhere except South Africa and North Africa. So everything in between is mine, and no one who speaks French. So what I do for Cisco is I'm a product sales specialist, specifically for security. But my background is in infrastructure, security testing. So in a former life, I was a solution architect and a hacker, which I would hope makes me uniquely qualified to speak to you about this today. But what I'd like to talk about today is, one, in the news, two, what I call the soft underbelly, why users are really what makes organizations vulnerable. And then I'll talk about how you can leverage your existing investment in your Cisco network to kind of address these threats today and the technologies that support that. So occasionally I'll punctuate this with a few products, but what I'd like to start with is actually what we call the threat landscape of today. So in the 90s, there was a lot of talk about viruses, and it was simple enough to go on the internet and download an update file, and it would cover you for what's going on around the world. And then in 2000, so in the mid-90s, you started seeing low sophistication, but you started seeing phishing attacks, with spam being sent to individual users, and mostly it was for advertising. There wasn't really much of malware. And then early 2000s, as we went through the whole millennium thing, you started seeing worms. And what worms are, obviously, pieces of malicious software that can propagate through your network. A lot of this was to cause disruption, but as time went on, you found it was more of to deliver malicious payloads into your networks. So spyware and robotics, and now from around 2012, 2013, you start seeing more advanced persistent threats, because now hacking became an industry. And by that, what I mean is that there was actually financial gain in entering people's networks, extracting information, and leaving without being seen, and leaving a backdoor. So what you find is that criminals tend to know more about your network than we do, because the same tools that you should probably be deploying to get better visibility as to what you're doing is what these people are putting in your networks, in order to know what you're doing and know where you have assets of value, and pulling these out of your network. So case in point, I'm not a South Park fan. I have a 7-year-old daughter who I don't want to influence negatively, but these two gentlemen, Kyle and Stan, terrible examples of how your children should be. But there was malware that was named after them. And what the authors of this particular malware did was actually put it in a legitimate advertising campaign. So they went into Google, Google Ads, created the Google Ads, and delivered these across Amazon, Yahoo, and YouTube. So legitimate ads, sites you trust, everything should be okay, and all of a sudden you have ads, click on them, and your hosts are infected. So the internet is no longer something that you can say block this, open that. It's more of access to the internet is required because of productivity. So it's very difficult to protect against things like these because you don't have any specific controls that you've put into your environment. How serious is this? Well, the Chinese think it is. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but the Chinese even create tools with a dashboard, and this is what their attackers usually have. So infect your PCs with malware, and there's a control panel to show who is connected, what is his internal IP address, what version of the malware has infected you, what version of Windows or Linux or whatever you're using, can I connect in and pull stuff out? This may seem way out there, but there's one customer in Nairobi who put in some Cisco source file. And what they found is that there's a fellow who had bought a Chinese phone, one of these ones that really don't have a brand, but it's a really nice phone. It's you're wondering, why do the Chinese sell Samsung Galaxy type phones and why are they so cheap? And it came with a software installation CD, which is strange because in this day and age, who sells a phone with a software installation CD? So he installed the software and he went on with his life, but the security guys found that there was a certain host on the network that was collecting was trying to email content out of the network from a random host. But what they found was that this software wasn't really for managing the phone. What it was doing is it was zipping up files on the host PC and emailing them out of the network. So malware can come in through any manner, any manner of ways. So the thing is that the risk is there, and they're well-funded, well-orchestrated attempts to actually get into the networks and remove information of value. So, and this revolves around business and services. There's a similar case with I think Airbus when they were selling the planes to the Chinese, and they came in for a negotiation, and they sat down with the Chinese, and these guys seemed to be giving them prices that were just about 10% above their cost of manufacture. So that's the type of risk that organizations run. And especially in public sector and financial institutions, it's all about being able to deliver services, and it's about competitive information. So we need to be able to protect ourselves. Now this is another story that was in the news the other day, and I'll just switch it quickly. So hackers, $1 billion was stolen from 100 plus banks in 30 different countries. This is actually the biggest bank heist in history. It's a what? So has anyone here heard of this?
Is it the Kaspersky thing?
Actually, it was. So there was the Kaspersky thing, and then so this is the one that Kaspersky actually spoke about. So yes, it is. So what happened was, what these guys would do, they would go in. But the challenge is that most people do is that they'll put in a point solution. Let me put in a watchman at the gate, or let me build a really high wall, and then just hope that no one will climb over it. Or by the time someone climbs over it, we'll probably build another wall behind. And this is kind of the challenge with security. So what these people would do is that they would send these phishing emails to people. People would click on malicious links, get infected. They would sit on a bank's network for anywhere between 2 and 4 months, monitor the workflows. Once they master the workflows, they would go and deposit, say for example, an account had $1,000. They would go and deposit a fictitious $9,000 and then run transfers of an actual $9,000 and move it out of the network. So the customer whose account was used to perpetrate the fraud would have no idea. He'd see a glitch in the statement, then his original balance would go back and he'd be happy. But what you'd find is that they were actually removing money. The most common operating system on an ATM is sorry? Exactly. So Windows XP. So who here patches Windows XP? Not even Microsoft anymore. I think there was like one patch that they released when it was really bad. So they would compromise, in addition to robbing the banks through what seemed to be legitimate transactions, they would actually compromise those hosts, and they would have a guy walk up to the ATM, and the ATM would dispense cash, and the guy would walk away. It does sound surreal, but this is actually something taking advantage of vulnerabilities in the underlying systems. This is something that has actually happened in a place like where people were able to withdraw cash from ATMs and they would just stand there, and this was not even a complicated hack. They would just do it with their cards because there's something up with the software in the ATM, and they were able to clean out their accounts because every time they did a transaction, it would be reversed, and then they just do it again. These fellows stood at the ATM from 10 in the evening to 4 in the morning and emptied the cassette. So having worked at a bank, that's actually quite a significant achievement because each ATM has 2 cassettes. Each cassette has approximately 2,000 notes. So they would do 4,000 notes, and in different denominations. They actually had the time. So you can imagine this was actually done across 30 countries. I know they're after some Russian guy, but I'm sure he's probably going to be just a scapegoat. Most of that money is not going to be recovered. But this is essentially the risk we run. So what we're saying is that we have a very new and dynamic threat landscape. So what you find is that 90% of organizations are not fully aware of the devices that are accessing them. People just being able to walk into your premises and plugging in stuff into your network and being able to access core critical systems. The other thing is that 14% of organizations had malware enter their organization through legitimate web apps, or maybe not so productive web apps, games and such and such and such. Again, speaks to the Kylan stance that I showed you in the beginning. What looks like a legitimate advertisement is actually malware, or using a web app that someone probably commonly use. Look, like you probably find this brilliant new chat app, or this very time-wasting game, or you go to a site and say box here, win an iPad or an iPhone, click here, okay. I was actually a victim once because I was bored. I was looking for a movie. I was actually looking for a movie called Chappie that had just come out. I was about to travel the next day and I thought, let me download this. And so I used Google and I got to a site and I thought it was a direct download. I clicked and it redirected me to a site for an extortionist. And so these guys were like, so every time you click, they had it in a loop that it would just bring up the same thing again. And after a certain number of loops, they basically said, so pay $100 and this will stop. So I obviously had to go to my command line and I killed my browser. But you can actually see how easy it would be to actually compel a user to actually make a payment to do some of these things. So malware is a problem. Even for people who are supposed to be more aware of what's going on. So I was a victim myself. So 5 to 10 times more cloud services are being used than are known by IT. So that's also another very big thing. And then you find that 92% of the top 500 Android applications have actually been at some point, if not currently. And even knowing that there are things happening, it's very difficult for us to address them. Well, so just case in point. So 60% of data is stolen in a few hours. For retailers, 85% of point of sales intrusions aren't discovered for weeks. In fact, the interesting thing is that what's called the MTTK, or the mean time to know, on average, or what we call the average amount of time that an attacker is on a network before you even have any idea he was there. And he's probably done everything he's wanted, and he's exfiltrated data, and he has a backdoor. Is in excess of 260 days. And those who have been hacked, but have no idea they've been hacked. It's a very unpopular thing to say. The thing about your infrastructure being compromised is that rather than it being a possibility, it is more of an eventuality. And there is no point solution that will say, if I put this in, if I put this particular point solution in, then I'm okay. And just as testament to that particular fact, and this is where we talk about the soft underbelly. Users are basically the point through which attackers prefer to come into the network. They're the people who interact. So you have your users, going out to the internet, coming back in, sending and receiving email. It's part of the work that they do. There's no way you're going to have a productive organization without interaction with the outside world. The only safe computer is a computer with no operating system, no network card, no screen, that probably calculates the trajectory for ballistic missiles or something. As in, essentially, everything needs to be networked in order for there to be value. In fact, Massey's law talks about the value of a network. That the value of a network is actually directly proportional to the square of the number of nodes. So the more interconnectivity you have between things, the more value there is. So there's no way that we can avoid being interconnected. Well, last year, spam, phishing attacks were a big thing, and as Java and Flash were hardened, what you found was that there was a 250% increase in the use of spam. In fact, what was very popular is something called a snowshoe attack. So what a snowshoe attack is that the attackers will go and they will compromise multiple email accounts, but they won't overtly take them over so that you start getting an email, "Hi, my name is John, I'm in Nigeria." Have you ever gotten any of those emails from your friends? Like, I got one from my brother-in-law. It's like, "Hi, I'm in Nigeria, and I need $5,000. I was like, "No, you're not. I saw you yesterday." So I called him, then he see him sending this text out. He's like, "Yes, that's not really me." So we had a good laugh about it. But people actually get conned that way. I once met a guy, a Kenyan, in the airport as I was traveling back, and he lived in Amsterdam, and he was telling me